Thank you. Call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Let's see. So roll call, please.
Member Lewis is absent. Member Spellingwood is absent. Member Rockwell.
Here.
Member Crowe.
Here.
Member Foltz.
Here.
Member Morse is present online. Member Covey.
Here.
And Member Paul.
Here.
Yeah, oh, and Chair Jacobson.
Here.
Saved the best for last.
Thank you. We can debate that one later.
So Lewis is here.
Hey, Carla. Member Lewis is here. I guess, John, you were here when I wasn't here, so
Yeah.
our first one together, so welcome. Glad to see you here. Glad to have you aboard. Approval of the minutes. Anyone like to make a related motion to that?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for the April 14th meeting, April 26th workshop, and May 12th meeting of the UAB.
Well done. We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, any discussion from the public? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Now, adoption of the agenda. I would entertain a motion related to the adoption of the agenda.
We've got to revise it.
Yes, does everyone have the today's revised agenda? So this was just, the state of the utility was added to the agenda.
Move that we adopt the revised agenda? Is that what you're looking
Yes, or something like that.
for? Second.
Motion, a second, any discussion? Discussion from the public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. State of the utility.
So, Mr. Chair, before we start, and the attorney would like to introduce the newest version who's
Oh.
going to be working with you.
Please.
Hello, UAB members, Chair. I would like to take this opportunity to present the newest utility attorney, Bianca Larison. She comes to us most recently from Tallahassee, the Public Service Commission. And I will be leaving the city attorney's office August 31st to go play with grandbabies. So just wanted to give you an opportunity to meet Bianca. You'll be seeing her over the next few years at all your meetings.
Great.
Hello, everyone.
Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure to have you, and thank you for all your time in your future. Playing with grandbabies sounds a little more fun
Yeah.
than.
And we apologize ahead of time for anything and everything.
All those in favor? All right, now we will do the state of the utility update.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, a couple things. One is just recognizing Lisa Bennett. So a couple of things, and she's just been a wonderful utility attorney for us. And then her commitment to overlap and train the new Bianca coming into the role through August 31st. So I could easily see her wanting to just jump ship, and she is committed to that, a good handoff, and has been doing it a couple of months already. And we'll do it through the 31st. So really appreciate them working together, and look forward to Bianca continuing to onboard. With that, so unfortunately we don't have an updated all of our data and graphs and what we want to show on a regular basis to the UAB tonight. But in the July meeting, our intent is to come with a draft. Here's a new kind of operational update, and then get feedback. We've been churning a lot of different ideas of what that will look like and making sure that it's useful. And so again, we'll bring that at the next meeting. I will just give a quick update on the state of the utility. So we have had an injury recently, which we're now 14 days injury-free. We're at a number of injuries that is kind of similar to last year, so we're hoping to improve there, but we're about on the same track. Similar with preventable collisions in our vehicles. You know, we drive a couple million miles a year, all in our community here, and we do have collisions that are part of that. And again, we're on kind of the same path as last year in terms of number of collisions as well. From a water wastewater standpoint, we have had 23 SSOs, which is one of our KPIs, sanitary sewer overflows. Most of those continue to be because of toiletries and grease. So folks putting those things into our system, non-flushable wipes and grease causes blockages. We do our best to clean those systems and try to keep those blockages from occurring, but with 800 miles of pipe, it's difficult to do that on a continuous basis. And so we continue to try to educate our customers with regards to that. In addition, in water, wastewater, as well as the rest of the systems, we are experiencing supply chain issues coming off of COVID. There continues to be some supply chain issues, whether it's materials or chemicals, and we are continuing to work with our vendors. We are a high priority customer for any vendor because of what we do in providing power and water and wastewater and gas. So we haven't had an issue where we have completely run out, but we've moved closer than it feels comfortable to in a couple of places. And then in addition, we've paused some work as we've entered hurricane season to make sure we have materials available if we do get some damage to our system. So we're balancing that, working with vendors and keeping our eye on that as we move forward. Energy supply, and Dino is here, the energy supply officer that can give more details, but I know you all were aware that we had a fire there earlier this year. We have got all the cooling tower cells up and operational. The cooling tower 1 that had the primary damage, so the other ones are all in play. We're utilizing them. Cooling tower 1, we have a deluge system that we just need to put that back into operation, which will be happening soon, and then all of them will be operational. So we're in a really good spot there. It was about several $1 million in damage, and we are, through our insurance and working with the company that is responsible, we're working toward what does that ultimately look like for us. We have a $500,000 deductible. We're also trying to recover that from them as well. And then an energy delivery, big thing, and this will come at the workshop in 2 weeks. A lot more detail on this, but AMI, we're receiving a lot of the meters that we were looking to replace. Again, supply chain issues. We've been a little bit shaky on how much are we going to get and when. We've received most of those meters. We're testing and getting all those up and running, and so we're going to be ready for late summer doing the real deployment of the actual meters. A lot of the mesh system is being put in place, and we have a test area that's almost done with a number of meters, but the massive deployment will be later this year. And again, there's going to be a lot more detail on that on the 28th during the workshop. We'll give an update. So that's the update for this time. And like I said, next month in July, we'll hopefully we will have a very at least a straw man idea of a report going forward, and look for feedback from you all.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to that. And appreciate your efforts. Excited about AMI coming. I know meters are in very short supply these days, so I'm pleased that you're able to do that. So, any questions, comments from the UAB?
Wasn't there a news story that the vendor had actually dropped the solar initiative?
Mr. Chair, no. So there was a press conference on Monday that the folks that we're contracting with, Origis, they had a press conference on Monday where they have worked with the neighbors in the area. So if you remember, previously there were some challenges with the neighbors in the area and the application they had in with Alachua County. So they've come to an agreement with the neighbors, and now they're moving forward with a framework to select another site. So they haven't selected that site completely yet, but they're working with those neighbors in a framework and how that can be sited. And setback and other requirements to do that. So we're really looking forward to that project moving forward at this time. And again, moving forward is starting the application process and permitting, and then obviously ultimately construction and operation, put it in operation. But we're at the beginning of that process now. So it's a celebration on Monday because we got to a place to where we think they can work with those neighbors to have a site still in the general area of our system.
It's not dead.
Oh, no, opposite. It is moving forward.
Very exciting. Jason, thank you for using your light.
So when we get these updates, we get sort of generalities about the fuel supply. I know related to our coal procurement, we get a quarterly update that goes to the city commission about sort of where GRU's coal is coming from, and what sort of mines it's coming from. And I had a kind of similar curiosity about the fuel supply for the biomass plant. I know that we have a policy that kind of came along with that of where we'll procure the fuel for that. But there seems to be a lot of kind of strange notions in the community about where our biomass supply is coming from. And I'm wondering if this is something that is already scheduled for us to talk about semi-regularly, or if not, if we could have some sort of a more in-depth conversation, maybe even just once a year or something, about the biomass supply and kind of dig into the details a little bit more. I think that would go a long way toward, a little ways at least, towards dispelling some of the notions in the community about that.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, I think that's a good segue to the next meeting or the workshop where we give an AMI update. I think it would be good for us to not only give an AMI update, but also update on that fuel. We can update on that fuel supply and one other major project we have going on at our Main Street plant. And so at the end of the meeting, when we talk about the next meeting, where we're headed, I think that we'll do that, and we'll be prepared to give that update on the fuel supply and DHR. I think items like that make sense to do on an annual basis, not a monthly, and try to get it in a report. And so that's a good idea, and we can do that. At the end of the meeting, we can talk about it, but we could do that as part of the AMI update at the next meeting as well, or the workshop meeting.
No, that'd be great. And you were talking about the clogs you guys have been having. I just spent the last 2 weeks on a sailboat with very sensitive toilets, and I made it very clear to my crew that whoever was responsible for a blockage would be involved in the clearing of the blockage. So, if you just go upstream from where the blockage happens and get those people involved, I think that problem may go away. Just throwing it out there. All right, we are on. Oh, thank you. I have a light. Oh, thanks.
For members, please excuse me since I'm kind of catch-up mode here. I know the AMI, these are the meters, right? We tried for years and years and years to get by that because we read meters at 50 cents a month per meter, but it was hard to buy anything at that price. So I guess if at that time, and the next one, if you could kind of explain the rationale, were you going to time of day or something like that you were going to be able to recoup the revenue for the meters?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I think that at the next meeting we can get into some of that more detail.
Okay, thank you, John. If nothing else, we'll move on to citizen comment. Any citizens would like to make comment?
Can I make comments on just general items?
Whatever you want
Okay,
to talk
perfect. That's what I want to do. So I'm Roberta Gastmeyer. I'm here tonight as a representative of the NAACP Environment and Climate Justice Committee. And last year we formed a team to work on a DOE technical assistance grant application, which we called Project Empower. That stands for Energy Modernization for People, Opportunity, Work, Equity, and Renewables. And this team includes representatives from the NAACP, the Community Weatherization Coalition, the neighborhoods of Greater Duval and Spring Hill and East Gainesville, the SWAG neighborhoods and west of Gainesville, and staff from Alachua County, the City of Gainesville, Alachua County Schools, and GRU. A couple of months ago, we found out that we were in fact awarded the grant, one of only 23 in the entire U.S., the only one in Florida. This is a technical assistance grant from the U.S. Department of Energy, and it's designed to support community-driven plans to increase energy resilience, lower utility costs, and provide long-term jobs and opportunities. So we've been assigned a professional team from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, and they're going to be working with us over a period of 12 to 18 months to develop a realistic, achievable plan for an equitable pathway to 100% renewable energy, focusing on communities that are experiencing economic challenges. So with the technical assistance provided, Project Empower will explore ways to reduce energy bills through expanded efficiency measures, develop a pathway to electrification of space and water heating systems, develop solar projects in low-income neighborhoods with the potential for microgrid service for added resilience, and incorporate youth internships for job opportunities in the construction process. There's no funding associated with this grant, but completing the project will put our community at the top of the list for additional funding opportunities coming down later. And I want to thank GRU for partnering with us. It's been critical and as far as providing data and helping us write the grant and having members come to the meetings and provide input. It's been a huge part of the success of the grant so far, and we think it's critical to the project overall. So we'll be having our first meeting with NREL next week, and I hope to keep you up to date on the progress as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. That's very exciting. Thank you for all your work to make that happen, and we would like to hear updates.
Hi, Nancy Darren. I just wanted to reflect on the budget presentations that we had a little while ago and thank Mr. Cunningham and all the staff. Claudia, I was reminded just how challenging and how intricate it is to run an incredibly diverse, incredibly high-quality utility like we are so fortunate to have. And the efforts to help us move forward, reducing the debt, stabilizing things, and creating opportunities to move forward in really positive ways. So I just want to applaud and commend the entire staff and Mr. Cunningham for bringing such a feeling of openness and ability to talk about these things that we're going to have really difficult and confusing discussions and throw a lot of spaghetti on the wall. So thank you for your leadership in this. I appreciate it. And to all of the staff.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else? All right. Moving on to new business. The Energy Authority guarantee increase.
So, Mr. Chair, we have on remotely Jamie from the Energy Authority. This is an item that we took to the city. Typically, we like to bring items to the UAB first and then to the City Commission for approval. This item came up kind of quickly in the timing of our board meetings with the Energy Authority, and so we needed to get approval in a timely manner, and so we did that with the City Commission. So we're bringing it to you post already getting approval, but we wanted to make sure that you all got to see the information and understand what it is. And Jamie will also kind of give us an overview of the Energy Authority so that we understand, everybody is on the same page of understanding what that is, what purpose they serve, and how we interact with them as a member. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie and let him start the presentation. Thanks, Jamie.
Great. I'll take a mic check first, make sure that you can all hear me.
Okay.
Great. So my name is Jamie Maney. I'm Vice President of Client Services for the Energy Authority. I'll share my presentation from here if that's preferred. You guys see this okay?
Yes, it's good.
Great. So the Energy Authority, as you may know, we are a nonprofit energy marketing, analytics, and portfolio management company. And by nonprofit, we are owned by public power utilities, including Gainesville Regional Utilities. And so when we were created, we were really created with the thought in mind that we're the bridge between public power utilities like GRU and the wholesale energy markets. And if you think about the physical complexity, the things that Mr. Cunningham and staff at GRU have to deal with, they're keeping the lights on, distributing electrons, generating electrons, all of those things that are very particular and deep skill set that's required for any electric utility or otherwise. The energy market also has some complexities, more financial complexity. It's ever changing, ever evolving, very competitive and data intensive. And so when we were created, the Energy Authority was really created to kind of bridge the gap between those two areas and to make sure that we're doing that with always having one foot firmly planted in public power. And so the GM or CEO of our 7 owning organizations, including GRU, make up the board of the Energy Authority. And so that board ensures that that our risk policies, our activities, the services that we provide are all aligned with the needs of public power utilities and with GRU. And really these days, as we all go through the energy transformation, both individually, each client utility, as well as the nation as a whole, and we transform essentially our entire power supply grid. It's just that much more important that we stay, again, in lockstep with the values of the communities that we serve. And so that's how we're set up. And that's a little bit about sort of the framework or the way that we view ourselves. Let's see if I can switch gears here. Here we go. So our clients, we have 7 utilities that are owners of TEA. And as we mentioned, the GMs or CEOs of those 7 owners sit on our board of directors. We also have 2 standing committees underneath the board of directors, and staff from each of these utilities are on those standing committees as well. In addition to our 7 owning utilities, we also serve around 55 other public power utilities that are located all across the United States. Again, all of these are community-owned utilities, and we serve them both to increase the depth and breadth of our knowledge. So as we see, sort of a wider span of what's happening across the country in different energy markets, we can bring that knowledge home to make a difference in Gainesville. And so we do that intentionally to ensure that we can provide the benefits of understanding kind of the wholesale energy markets, in mass, as well as the local needs of each of our utilities. Our mission at its core is really to maximize the value of our clients' assets and GRU's asset. And as we think about this, we think about Deerhaven, we think about the natural gas pipelines, we think about the Energy Authority itself. We are an asset that's owned by GRU. And so how do we maximize that value to bring value back to GRU? The way that we do that are through services that we provide to GRU and other utilities. Really our capstone service, we think of it as portfolio management, and the best, I guess, analogy I have is if you think of meeting with your financial advisor, if you have one, and sitting down with a financial advisor and talking about what are your long-term plans? And I want to retire in 10 years. How am I going to get there? And what does my investment portfolio look like? And how do I change that portfolio or alter that or customize it to make sure that I'm going to meet all of the needs? In my case, I've got 2, 18 and a 20-year-old daughter. So how am I going to pay for their weddings and then also retire, right, at some point? And so in the same way, we sit down with each of our utilities and we talk about what are the long-term goals of the utility. So, we've heard even just today already some of the really interesting projects that are going on between AMI, advancing in renewables and others. So how do we sit down and set out those goals and then create a long-term power supply plan for meeting those goals? And then we work with utilities to actually enact those goals. So let's say we have determined we're going to build or buy 50 megawatts of solar. We can go out to the marketplace and actually create the RFP, go ask hundreds of suppliers to respond to that RFP and say, this is what I would provide for Gainesville in that case, and then help select the right projects and the right builders, the right partners to do that. And then in, kind of in real time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, we have a trade floor in Jacksonville, Florida. And on that trade floor, we are trading energy, power and natural gas on behalf of GRU to ensure that we're optimizing the assets that are already in place. All of that with the idea of trying to reduce costs back to GRU on the power bill ultimately. Over on the right here, so I kind of touched on portfolio management, bilateral energy trading, natural gas management. All the way to the right here, we have a service what we call connected analytics, and I'll just mention that a lot of the things that we are talking about with our utilities that I've heard already mentioned today with regards to once you have AMI meters in place, now you have a plethora of data, and what are you going to do with that data, right? How do you get the most out of that data? And so we have a team of data scientists who work on that distribution level data to try to create or enable the type of connected communities that you guys are mentioning in the NREL study and those type of things. Ultimately, there's going to be analytics, there's data that are required in order to really pull off some of those really big goals that we and GRU and many of our client utilities have in place at the moment. So that's a little bit about what we do. I want to talk a little bit about the benefits that GRU receives as an owner of the Energy Authority. And so the first, and this was really the foundational benefit. Back in 1997, our industry deregulated, which created this space for wholesale energy transactions between utilities. Before then, there was some limited amount of that happening, but it wasn't really. It was enabled by FERC, the Federal Electric Regulatory Commission, in the mid-90s. So in 1997, the Energy Authority was created in order to perform those activities, those wholesale energy trading activities on behalf of public power utilities. And so if you think about the key value proposition is that it's less expensive for GRU to join together with other utilities and do this together rather than having to do it each individually. And so we think of that as an economy of scale or an avoided cost. So how much cheaper is it for TEA to do this versus GRU to do it on its own? And so that's one key pillar of our value proposition, is to be able to execute, schedule, settle all of those physical and financial commodity transactions across power and gas, all around Florida and the Southeast on GRU's behalf, and do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And all of the software, the people, the systems, everything that's required to do that. And so we have a trade floor, as I mentioned, in Jacksonville. And if I had a picture of it, which I did, these folks are sitting in front of a computer with literally 8 or 10 screens in front of them with different prices, different commodities, all of these things happening at the same time. And they're talking online in real time to staff at GRU about what's happening in your system and what type of excess can we sell into the market? What do we need to buy? And can we do that cheaper than GRU can generate in order to optimize all of those things kind of simultaneously? The second real pillar of value that GRU benefits from is our advisory business. And what we mean by this is really that, it's one thing to save some money on having somebody do this for you, and they do it cheaper than you would, right? But in addition to that, we have 225 employees now, and they're focused on these markets every day. And part of the value that they can bring is to say, well, it's not just enough to sort of go to the neighbor and buy some power or sell some power. How can we really optimize the entire asset framework for GRU? And what are the results of that optimization? And so we create trading strategies based on your portfolio. We use all of that market intelligence and analytical capabilities and all those people, as well as the fact that we're in all these different markets. And so if it's cheaper, for instance, to purchase electricity for Gainesville rather than burning natural gas, and then turn around and sell the natural gas or the pipeline capacity to a neighboring utility who needs it in that moment, we can do that. And the savings that are created by that go back directly to Gainesville to lower, ultimately, the cost to your ratepayers. So we capture the added value from all of those strategies and calculate those cost savings and make sure that we report that back to GRU as well. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the Energy Authority is also an asset that GRU owns. And all of those other utilities that we serve that are not our 7 owners, but all those other 50 plus utilities, they pay us on a contract basis for those services. And any margins that we generate from that business go back to reducing the cost to GRU and our other 6 owners. And so our success measure there is to make sure that we run a profitable business and that those profits, or what we call margins, come back to GRU and our other owners. And so if you add all that together, really on an annual basis, GRU benefits typically on a normal year, probably $3 million a year, $3 to $4 million each year. Last year we had a record year, and GRU benefited by over $10 million through its ownership in the Energy Authority. So that's a little bit about kind of how we were created, what we do, and how GRU benefits as an owner. One of the obligations of an owner, so one of the ways that we stay in business, is that our owners, our members, jointly support our activity via what we call trade guarantees. And this is, the Energy Authority doesn't have a large balance sheet. Really, we're just employees, and so we don't keep a lot of money. Any money that we make, for instance, by selling electricity from GRU to JEA, for instance, that money goes right back to GRU. We don't hold on to that, and so we don't have much of a balance sheet. So when we go out to the market, we wouldn't have much credit in the market if it weren't for our owners. And so our 7 owners provide guarantees that say if anything ever happened and T couldn't pay its bills, that our owners stand behind us. Those guarantees have never been called on, but that's the purpose. It allows us to go to the market and establish credit so that we can trade with over 300 counterparties in the market. And so, as we talked about, one of the ways that we can provide value is from all of us getting together and doing this more cheaply together. Well, by combining those 7 members' guarantees, TEA is able to go out and be enabled with hundreds of counterparties. We're able to be the largest community-owned trading entity in the United States, and then bring all the value of doing that back to GRU. That also allows us, again, to optimize those portfolios and to trade on behalf of all of those other clients that we have in order to receive those margins back from those contracts. So the guarantees are really, foundational to how TEA is set up and how the marketplace looks at us, because they don't look at, if they're selling us power, they sell it to TEA. What we know internally is that power is going to GRU, but the marketplace doesn't know that. And that actually provides some anonymity to GRU and JEA and all of our other clients, so that the marketplace can't take advantage of any one utility's particular, you might be in the paper if a unit goes down, or if you have some kind of malfunction, something like that. If we go to the market and we say, hey, we need to buy 200 megawatts, we're the Energy Authority, they don't know that that's for GRU or for JEA. Whereas if they're reading the paper and they know that there's a failure on a unit or something like that, maybe a counterparty would know, oh, these guys are desperate. And so it provides some anonymity the way that we're set up as well. So as I said, those guarantees are foundational. Due to our structure, it's really our only credit facility. The levels at which we've set those are 15 years old, or we're 15 years old. And we've been managing them very closely for 15 years. But what's happened is that, they're really related to how much electricity, TE is purchasing or selling, and also the price of that electricity. And if you've picked up a paper in the last 3 months, right, you understand that volatility is significantly increased in the market, not just because of Russia and Ukraine, but really over the past few years as we all embark on this energy transformation. It creates a higher amount of volatility in the market. And due to that, we're also recommending that our clients purchase more, so hedge their activity more, to make sure that those large price spikes, that they're not as impacted. And so our volumes are going up, the prices are going up. And as I mentioned, we also serve other utilities for the benefit of our owners. We're always looking to add new utilities to that. And so all of those things put together mean that the guarantees that we've had in place, the level of those guarantees, are not adequate for us going forward. So we have to increase those. So what we have sought and has been approved is an increase in that guarantee. GRU's portion of that, so just your portion, went from $9.6 million to $20 million. It actually went to 15 on June 1, and it will go to 20 on December 1. And again, this is a footnote in GRU's financials that says, we guarantee the activity of the Energy Authority up to this amount. It's not cash. It's not a bank account that you're putting it into. It's just saying that the strength of GRU is backing this activity of the Energy Authority. And only in it would have to be a pretty dreadful scenario, would T not be able to pay its bills, and therefore our creditors would come to us, and if we couldn't pay that bill, then they would go through us to our owning utilities, including GRU. But that exposure would be limited to the amount of one, whatever we owe that counterparty, and then two, GRU's portion of that. GRU is 1/17 owner, so we have 7 owners, but the way that it's broken down is we have 2 medium owners who each have 1 ownership share, and then 5 large owners who each have 3 ownership shares. And so the large owners, it's all on a pro rata basis, so the large owners are increasing their amount to $60 million. GRU and our other medium owner increased their amount to $20 million. So that's a very quick flyby of who we are, why GRU is an owner, kind of what we do, and then specific to these guarantees, how we rely on those for delivering the services that we do. I'd love to answer any questions or anything else I can help with.
All right. Okay, Jamie, thank you for that presentation. That was very informative and interesting. I'm not sure whether you're the right person to answer this one or maybe Tony. I understand that it's unlikely they're going to call this. Is there any impact on GRU's ability to, is that limiting our ability to borrow money? Any direct financial impact?
Yes, Chair, no, there's no direct financial impact. It doesn't change our liabilities or leverage.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Hey, Don.
Do any of these activities come under any regulatory authority?
I think I heard whether these activities come under a regulatory authority.
Yes. Can you answer that, Jamie?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, so depending on the commodity, there's different rules, but the CFTC, the FERC, and there are other entities that do oversee these type of activities, depending on, and really a big distinction is if it's a short-term physical trade of power or gas, typically FERC is overseeing that. If you get into more complex trades, which we do, the CFTC may have oversight over those. Regardless, we have a director of compliance who reports to our chief risk officer, and his team's full-time job is to ensure that we understand all of those regulations that we're subject to, that we train our staff on those, and that what Tony's heard us say it a million times, but to have a culture of compliance, so that everything that we do, because we recognize we report ultimately to you, right, and to the city commission. So everything we do needs to be transparent above board so that I can always stand here with a straight face and be proud of what we've done.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Jason?
I've got 2 questions. One I think is best directed to you, Tony. So Jamie mentioned that GRU benefited last year, I think, by over $10 million. So does that look like income on our books when we're looking at budgeting and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it would look like revenue, and it would be go to our rate stabilization fund and be a part of that, the reserves.
And then my second question is for Jamie. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little more specifically about T's expertise in helping utilities reach the sort of renewable goals that our city commission has set for our utility.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, a key part of our corporate culture or DNA is sort of listen first, right? We are client driven, and ultimately we wear the goals that the utility has set for itself, and then try to determine how can we best use the skills, the things that we do to help you meet and achieve those goals. And so across the country, we have clients in California who have very aggressive renewable and carbon goals. And those clients, some of them have actually been created in order to go faster than what the state is dictating. And if you know anything about California state rules, they're pretty quick. And so these communities have gotten together and said, we want to be even faster than that. And so we're involved there again in creating integrated resource plans. So looking at what is the long-term needs for the utility? How do we create different scenarios that meet those needs, which are really bespoke or customized to each utility? And then the second thing we do is, okay, we with community input, we've approved this integrated resource plan. Now, how do we go out and actually do it? And so we are right now, you guys probably read about the tariffs on solar and some of the things going on, but between that and inflationary issues within the solar industry, we are actively working with solar providers right now to ensure that they can deliver what they've promised to our different utilities to provide and build out these different capabilities. We actually also just went live in California with our first battery optimization program. And so someone mentioned microgrid earlier. There's a microgrid in California within one of our clients, service territories where they have a battery attached to solar, and we're optimizing that battery so that we charge it at the right time and discharge it at the right time, all respecting sort of the physical limitations of that. So what I'm trying to say is that from planning through execution through you have it in place and now we want to make sure we're getting the most value out of it. We're doing that sort of, from soup to nuts, as they say. And I use California just because they're always obviously on the leading edge of some of these things, but it's not just there, right? We are seeing this everywhere. We're seeing this in Springfield, Missouri, and we're seeing it in Springfield, Illinois, and we're seeing it in Gainesville and in Jacksonville. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere. And so we really are. It's been, it's just such an interesting time to be part of the industry because everyone, at different paces, for sure, but everyone's going through this energy transformation. And we're all getting there eventually together. But some are going to be quicker than others, and GRU, I think, definitely is a leader in that space.
All right. Fletcher.
Yeah, I have a question. I know later tonight we're going to be talking about the new IRP that TEA is going to be involved with. Are we going to talk about what TEA is actually doing and what the schedule for various completion sections are?
So, Mr. Chair, the presentation tonight is primarily focused on the previous IRP and with the purpose, and this was kind of part of what was talked about with our matrix and what we wanted to focus on. The purpose is to kind of bring everybody up to speed of what we did in the previous IRP. We will talk a little bit about the roadmap forward, but we're not going to get into very much detail. I think, as the member has mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about schedule and kind of where we're headed, but we're not going to get into the details of the next IRP tonight. We'll have plenty of those discussions in the coming months, but not tonight. Tonight will be focused more on the previous IRP, the process we went through, and where we ended up there.
Yeah, just for Jamie's background, our membership has changed so that the members of the UAB that were deeply involved with the last IRP, some of them have rolled off, and we have some new ones that have rolled on. So we're going to have to start from scratch for some of the folks that haven't been involved with this yet.
And my sense is that this board wants to be involved in the IRP on the front end of the analysis. It kind of felt we were on the receiving end, so we're looking forward to our involvement in that. Anything else from the board? Any citizen questions, comments on the presentation?
Roberta Gastmeyer, speaking for myself now. I'm a little fuzzy on how TEA is compensated, and it seems like there might be some conflict of interest of having a gas broker work for GRU and have that same organization also do the IRP, planning, and that they, maybe are profiting off of this gas transactional thing that they're also proposing during the IRP. So just a question on how they're compensated, I guess.
Thank you. Yep. Would anyone like to comment on, is there compensation from TEA on a gas purchase? Yeah,
so that is part of our arrangement with them. I can't provide the details of that. I might have Mr. Walters come up and kind of give a little more detail on that.
So, Chair, members, Eric Walters, Admin and Fuels Operations Director for GRU, and I'd have a lot of dealings with the Energy Authority because the fuel group as well as the power group that trades this power daily also report to me. So the short answer is no, T doesn't make a profit on this, right? As owners of a business, you cover all of the cost of their personnel, software, all of that. And so these services that they provide are part of that cost of owning. So there's no transactional overhead that they get or margin that they get from those. So whether they make one trade for us or whether they make 10,000 trades for us, it's the same pay. So with the gas optimization, it's just that. Is they're taking a volume that we own as a utility and remarketing it. So all of that profit that they do to remarket comes directly back to us. They don't keep any of that. As far as the integration and the IRP goes, what they do is they have this connected analytics group. They have this group of data analysts that are part of that we help pay for every year, and we're simply utilizing that service as part of the IRP. They don't get any additional compensation for it. They don't get any transactional compensation for it. All of the costs are what they are, and they're divided by the members, and we pay them every year. No margin, no overhead. Of course, their salaries are included, but they don't get a boost from doing an IRP or not doing an IRP, at least from the members. They don't get a boost from doing a gas transaction or a power transaction, at least not from us. So it's all, we're paying the flat cost, no overhead on that. Does that answer the question?
I think for the most, you said, at least not from us. Why the qualification?
So we cover the cost of actually running the business. So Jamie mentioned that there are 50 other utilities that they partner with that they do charge a fee for some of these services. The margin from that they charge goes back to offset our cost, right? So we don't pay them any additional. It all goes to pay down their cost. And so whatever is left that's not covered, that's not accounted for, it's divided amongst the members, and then that's paid. So when I say from us, we don't pay an additional cost for that. For those other members that they're providing a service to, then that margin comes from them.
And just to be clear, correct me if I'm wrong, when you say that, so like if they did a trade for utility X, TEA would not benefit from that trade. The owners would benefit from the trade by reducing the cost to TEA.
Correct.
Going to Roberta's question about
Correct.
potential conflict of interest. Their salaries, there's no extra profit that goes to them based on a decision one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Chair, they would charge a service fee, right? And that service fee would come back to help offset those costs.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's an important question. We want to make sure everyone's
Absolutely.
confident that they're acting in our best interest.
I'll stay.
How are the costs, allocated between, among utilities?
So
How
it's
is it arrived at?
So Jamie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's divided by the ownership portion of each utility. So we own 1/17 of it. There's other members that own 1/17, and then there's larger members that own, I believe, 3/17 of that. So it's divided that way.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, appreciate it.
No, I just want to say one thing. Thank you for repeating that information. I think all of that was in that presentation, and I appreciate the presentation on this item. Thank you so much.
I'm glad I don't have to divide by 17 on everything.
Sure.
So Nancy Darren, thank you for the presentation. I'm curious what would be a worst-case scenario where we would get called on the guarantee pool. I appreciate the expertise, and this has been a very helpful presentation to me to better understand things. My greater concern is that we are in an era of depletion of fossil fuels, and natural gas has been a big piece of all this. And it's not, and pricing is a huge issue that I don't see getting any better, but my greater concern is supply. I just read that this summer they're expecting demand in the U.S. to exceed the supply in the US. So what is a worst case scenario for what we're guarantee pool, which is a great thing to have? And how is TEA dealing with the reality or looking at the depletion side of this very complicated time?
Okay, thank you. Jamie, maybe you can address that question of
Sure.
what would cause us, to actually call to guarantee.
Yes, happily, Chair. So so two great questions there. The one, and of course we've tried to create scenarios, in our heads and on paper of what could possibly go wrong enough to have those guarantees called on ultimately. And if you think about us again, to everything Eric has said as well, we work as an extension of staff, of GRU staff. So if you think of us, we're your employees who happen to live in Jacksonville. And so everything that we do on behalf of the utilities we're not a broker. To be clear, we don't keep any of those transactional fees. So what happens is that if we went out and we sold a bunch of energy to company X, and then we purchased a bunch of energy for company Y. The way that typically our billing cycle goes is that anyone we've sold to pays us first, and then we can pay our bills to anyone that we owe. And the reason we do that is because we're nonprofit and we don't have any margin. We don't really have a big balance sheet, and so we make sure we're paid, and then we turn around and pay. So if GRU, if we purchase for GRU, you would pay us, and then we pay the market, or vice versa. And so the scenario would be that typically, one scenario would be that we would have counterparties who owe us money, who have suddenly gone out of business or unable to pay their bill to us. And what we would then do is any money that we do have, any cash we do have on hand, we would burn down through that cash. We would then borrow money. We have a line of credit, and so we could borrow money from a bank and try to pay the bills that way. We could do it all these different things, but ultimately, if none of that worked, we would then come to GRU and the other members and say, listen, this is the situation we're in. You can either have this counterparty that we owe, call in the guarantees, or you could actually, infuse some cash to TA to keep us afloat if it's a short-term issue or something like that. Again, in 25 years, none of this has happened, but we're trying to put together that scenario. So it would have to be a massive default and failure in the industry of potentially, probably several counterparties who owe us. The prices would have to be extremely high. The volumes would have to be extremely high in order to burn through the amount of guarantee that we have. And then when we turn around to the people we owe, we wouldn't be able to pay, one of them or all of them, and so that's the type of kind of doomsday scenario that would have to happen in order for that to happen. We have our chief risk officer, we have our own credit group that they have their own proprietary models, and what they are doing is looking at everyone who owes us money, and they are tracking those companies and making sure that if they're healthy, we know it, and if they're starting to lean towards non-health, then we know that too, and that we know it quickly. And then we inform GRU and our other counterparties if we see trouble in the industry. And an example of this is in the early 2000s when Enron, went bust. They're in our market. They're in energy trading. They do it very differently, or did it very differently than we do it. Thank God. But we saw that. And saw that, Enron, there are indicators that this isn't good. Same with Bear Stearns, same with Lehman Brothers. There have been people who have done. We've never had a default. In other words, we've never had a counterparty that has owed us money and has defaulted on that. And mainly because we've been proactive when we've seen that coming to make sure that whatever credit facilities we can get from that counterparty, whether it's cash, early payment, them providing guarantees to us that when something like that catastrophic might happen, that we're actually already paid. So we track that very carefully. So anyway, there are scenarios, of course, that are out there. That's why we need the guarantees and why there's credit in the marketplace. But they're one, we've never experienced one, and we hope and think that they're very unlikely. To your second question, So fuel is a big deal, natural gas, coal, other fuels, but they're not the only fuels. And we are absolutely transforming and transitioning to solar, to wind. We need batteries, quite honestly, to help settle some of this stuff out. And I don't know what technology that might be, but we need some big batteries to help, offset when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, obviously. We are going to go through, in my opinion, just me, I think it's going to continue to be volatile for a while. Because during the pandemic, if you think of it just on a macro basis, people were buying less, industries were shutting down, so on and so forth. A lot of these old coal generation facilities, for instance, one, were no longer economical, and so they've shut down, and the coal mines have shut down. And now we're coming back out of this, and they're not there anymore. And so now we're going through this transition of, we have to use gas in the meantime, but bringing on other types of resources to help balance the grid. And that's why it is volatile. It's why you're reading a lot about energy in the news, and it'll continue to be that way for a while, I think. And all that's just been exacerbated by international issues, but it's going to be that way for a while.
Okay, thank you. And I know it's been said before, we can't say enough times that one of the things we really have is our fuel diversity. So many utilities out there just sitting there on natural gas. We have biomass, we have gas, we have coal, and a little bit of solar. All right, anything else before we move on? Thank you, Jamie. That was very informative.
Thank you all.
So that's a pass-through informational. So now we'll move on to the discussion of the 2019 IRP.
Mr. Chair, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the purpose of this, a request from the board, was to really bring us all up to speed with new members, and some of us lived through this, some of us did not. And so the idea is to kind of go back through the previous integrated resource plan, have a little discussion around that. Jamie Versage is going to lead us through that discussion tonight. And then there will be a little bit of looking forward, and he'll kind of let us know where we are at this time. So with that, Jamie, take us away.
Thank you, Tony. Good evening. My name is Jamie Vershaw, Power Planning and Contracts Manager and Energy Supply. And I was part of the team that worked on the 2019 IRP. And that was really part of the team. And some of those team members are sitting in the back of the room right now, and I want to recognize one of those team members, Chuck Height, who's a project engineer for GRU, and helped to lead the 2019 IRP. Tonight's presentation is in response to a request to represent the 2019 IRP, and because we have some new UAB members, and because we're about to embark on our next integrated resource plan, it's a good time to go through this information and have this discussion. So as we mentioned, we have some brand new members on the UAB, and we're going to start from the very beginning. We'll talk about what an integrated resource plan is, how it's different from a 10-year site plan, because a lot of times those get confused, and how the 2019 IRP was created. We'll also talk briefly about the 2019 IRP and how it will be different from the next IRP. However, the purpose of tonight's discussion is really not to delve into the next IRP. We'll come back with a separate presentation about how we're going to go about that process and how there will be lots of opportunities for input. But for tonight, we're trying to focus on the 2019 IRP. Starting at the beginning, what is an IRP? There's a more formal definition that's coming up in a little bit, but I think this graphic helps to explain it more than the definition does. So what you're looking at is GRU's generation capacity. So the black line that you see on this chart is GRU's customer demand. It's forecasted over time. The red dashed line that you see is GRU's customer demand plus a 15% margin, which is required by the state of Florida. The different colored bars that you see are each generating units generating capacity. And as you go over time, you see some of those colored bars come off the chart. And that's because those units are scheduled to retire. can see there's a big drop off in 2032 when Deer Haven 2 is scheduled to retire. So the big question for the IRP is really, how do we fill in this gap? And Robin, if you can hit the enter button for me. So the big question is, how do you fill that in? Over time, our generation demand from our customers is going to outpace our generation capacity. There's certainly a lot of different ways that you can do that, and all those different options have different costs and risks and benefits. And an IRP helps you to identify those risks and those benefits and build a path that helps best meet your customers' needs. Next slide, please. For the more formal definition, an IRP is a comprehensive planning study which meets a recommended mix of resources that a utility may use to meet its customers' future electricity needs. So an IRP focuses on the long-term needs of the utility. Most have a 20-year focus or more. And our IRP is also largely an economic study where future costs are brought back to a present value so that different options can be compared over time. It helps to identify risks, and we'll talk more about those risks in a little bit. It helps look how different options perform in a variety of different economic, environmental, and regulatory scenarios. Next slide, please. So what is a 10-year site plan and what is it not? It is not an IRP. Every year, GRU provides the Public Service Commission a report called a 10-year site plan, and that is sometimes confused with the Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. So I want to go over what a 10-year site plan is and what it is not, and why it's not an IRP. A 10-year site plan follows a standard format. All utilities in Florida that have more than 250 megawatts of generation or are planning on building something more than 75 megawatts have to do a 10-year site plan. One of the purposes of a 10-year site plan is to give other state, local, and regional entities, such as Fish and Wildlife, give them notice if you're planning on building something so they can know what their impact may be. A 10-year site plan is not binding on a utility, and it includes tentative data. And the punchline of the 10-year site plan, what the state is really looking for, is resource adequacy. That is, does the state of Florida have enough assets to meet the needs of its citizens? Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, the 10-year site plan follows a standard format. There's 4 different sections of it. The first section is a description of existing facilities, which is an overview of what generation do you have, what transmission do you have. Next is a forecast of your electric demand and energy demand over the next 10 years, and background about how did you create that forecast. The next is about facility requirements. That is, what are you planning on adding? What are you planning on retiring? What is the impact to your system? And finally, there's an environmental land use information. And this is primarily if you're planning on building new generation, they want to know what are the environmental impacts going to be on that generation site. Within the 10-year site plan, everything that GRU puts in there is based upon existing or approved options. There's nothing speculative in the 10-year site plan, and anything that's not approved doesn't show up in the 10-year site plan. So even though we might be thinking about something long-term, we're not going to put it in the 10-year site plan because we're not sure about it. Next slide, please. An IRP is built around a set of parameters, and it identifies the long-term strategic needs of electrical generation within those parameters. GRU and other utilities have a long-term approach to meeting customer needs. The stuff that we do takes a long time to build and permit and design, and it lasts a long time. It could last 25 years or more. And so the focus that we have is really on the long term. An IRP focuses on the best solution for that long term, as we all know that something that seems attractive in the short term could ultimately cost you more over the long term. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, future costs within the IRP are brought back to a present value so that scenarios with different costs at different times can all be compared side by side. Specialized software is used for this process and it evaluates capital costs, fuel costs, operating costs, all within those set of constraints that you put on that scenario. The software solves for the lowest cost option across those different generation scenarios, and the lowest cost is usually referred to as the reference case. And everything else that you look at is compared back to the reference case. So if you're looking at building option A versus option B, then you can come back and see what the changes to the base case or the reference scenario. And of course, cost is not the only thing that you want to consider in an IRP, but certainly the cost back to our customers that they pay is certainly an important component that we can't overlook. Next slide, please. Part of the great thing about using this software is that it makes comparing scenarios so much easier. You can answer a lot of what-if questions. You can change a set of parameters and see how it impacts the results very quickly. For GRU's 2019 IRP, there were economic drivers that were changed to see the impact. Some of those impacts include changing fuel prices on a high basis or a low basis, changing access to market power through transmission, high and load scenarios. You can adjust for regulatory changes or technological drivers or changes in technology. All these what-if scenarios become a lot easier with an IRP. On this slide is a high-level look at the process for the creation of a traditional IRP. The first step is looking at your demand forecast, energy prices, and other economic parameters. It also involves gathering all your current and forecasted costs for your generation, including fixed and variable costs, and as well as planned modifications or retirements. Those two items feed into your resource needs and reliability criteria. From there, you determine your supply side options or your demand side options. So the supply side options, meaning what are you going to build, how are you going to source your power. Demand side options, meaning can you reduce your load through conservation or through some other sort of direct load control or other means. From there, you do the modeling within the specialized software. And from there, you kind of evaluate your alternatives and do sensitivity analysis, those high gas, low gas market parameters. And you develop recommendations and write the report. So that's sort of the traditional model for doing an IRP. So that's a general overview of what an IRP is and the process used to create an IRP. And now we'll go to the overview of GRU's 2019 IRP. So over the course of the last IRP, there were a lot of evolving parameters that changed while the process was going on. And the end product looks different than we envisioned when we set out on doing this IRP. So the IRP kicked off in February of 2018, and it was forecasted to take maybe a year or so, but it took 18 months. And that's because the scope grew and changed as we went along. So first thing that we had was in October 2018, we had the resolution for net zero emissions by 2045. We also had an area control error study done, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that looks at, how do these renewables impact our system stability? We also had the Kelly Steam Turbine 8 upgrade on the horizon. We entered into an ITN, an invitation to negotiate for 50 megawatts of solar. And all these changes resulted in a lot more scenarios than we originally planned, and the structure of the IRP looks different than we originally intended it to be. So within the reports, since we started this before we had the resolution, the report includes scenarios that do and do not meet the 2045 resolution. In fact, the reference case, the base case, is based upon fossil fuel generation. So that's one of the reasons that we have that, is that things change over time, and as we go on, we're going to learn that we're going to do things a little differently for the next one. As we discussed previously, the reference case is the least cost option, to which other scenarios are compared against. The reference case recommended building 80 megawatts of solar as soon as possible. And then when Deer Haven 2 retires, it recommended building a 3-on-1 combined cycle unit, which basically means 3 gas turbines feeding into 1 steam turbine. It also recommended building reciprocating internal combustion engines, we'll talk about that later, and doing a little bit of battery storage. So all of these results are baked back into the economic analysis. And this graph depicts the annual revenue requirement of the reference case over time. Here the costs are broken down into fuel and contracted power costs in red. Spot market purchases are shown in gray. Fixed costs of GRU's existing generation is in blue. And then new stuff that you build is shown in orange. In this slide, we're taking those revenue requirements and rolling them into a present value so that we compare the different scenarios. In this case, the reference case, the net present value looking over the 20-year horizon was $1.96 billion. So we go back and we'll reference that number a little bit later when we look at other scenarios. So those past 2 slides are helping us to answer how much it costs our customers to fill that oval. However, the reference case is certainly not the only way to fill that oval. Just because something is lowest cost doesn't mean it's the best option. There are certainly many different ways to fill that oval, and the alternative scenarios help us to evaluate those what-if questions. The scenarios allow us to vary one or more of those constraints and see what happens to the output and how that compares back to the base case. It helps us see risks or benefits that may not be initially obvious. For the 2019 IRP, scenarios were grouped into sensitivity analysis, system scenarios, load scenarios, area control error scenarios, and renewable scenarios. So again, we had a lot of scenarios baked into the IRP. So when you look at it, it's not the easiest thing to read through. That's because we had so much changing as we went along. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. There were 3 system scenarios that were evaluated as well. One of those is changing GRU's import limit from the grid from 120 megawatts to 200 megawatts, looking at how that changes our generation mix. Another scenario was looking at allowing any of our units to retire if it was economical to do so. And the last scenario was allowing anything to retire except for DHR. So there were 3 load scenarios that were considered. The first was a low load case, which assumed the loss of the city of Alachua as a customer to GRU after our contract ended at the end of February. We considered a high load case where we might bring on an additional 30 megawatts from off system. And the last load scenario was a winter peaking scenario where we assumed that our summer peak was equivalent to our winter peak. So that has different ramifications for some of the resources. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, GRU has to match how much energy it's supplying with its customers' demand. The indicator of how good of a job you're doing with that balance is called area control error, or ACE. You can think of ACE as a scale or a seesaw, where you've got demand on one side of the seesaw and supply on the other side of the seesaw. And when everything is balanced, your ACE is 0, and you're generating at 60 hertz. If you have a mismatch between supply and demand, your ACE gets away from 0. If you get too far away from 0 or too far away from 0 for too long, then there can be financial penalties. And GRU wanted to know what the impact of large solar facilities would be on our ACE. So we commissioned a study just for our system to look at the impact of large-scale solar. Part of the challenge that solar can have on ACE is that it ramps up and down very, very quickly, and it'd be difficult for our generating units to keep pace with solar. Some utilities are adding batteries to help mitigate that ACE, which can either be put into the demand bucket when they're charging or the supply bucket when they're discharging. Next slide, please. This slide is just an illustration of how solar can affect ACE. This data is taken from an FIT system near our Idlewild substation. The system's output was scaled to 50 megawatts and then 100 megawatts just so we could use an example of how this feeds into our system, or how a feature system will feed into our system. On the very top is GRU's net demand, and then on the gray there is the 50 megawatt system. Net demand after that is fed into our system, and the yellow is after 100 megawatts are fed into our system. And as you can see, it's quite volatile, and it'd be very difficult for our generation units to keep pace with that. But there are ways to mitigate that ACE that we'll talk about in just a little bit. Duck curves are big buzzwords around utility planning, and the term duck curve was coined by some California independent system operators. It shows the impact of net demand on varying amounts of solar, and as you get more and more solar added to your system, the curve starts to look like a duck if you stand back a little bit and use your imagination. So we'll talk about an example from California, but this is starting to become applicable for utilities across the nation as we see more and more renewables added to our systems. So all of GRU's generation assets have limits to how much generation they can output and how low you can turn them down before they trip offline. And they also have limits on how fast you can ramp them up and down. So this is an example from a spring day in California. And spring and fall are among the most challenging times for balancing a system because there isn't that much load. So on this particular example, on a spring day, we have the original system load shown on the light gray top there. And under these scenarios, when more and more solar is added, your net load curve starts to go down. So as you do that, you've got to start to turn down your other generating assets until you get to a point where you can't turn them down anymore, and you start to risk having overgeneration. Then, as the day goes on, around sunset, those solar facilities start to reduce their output, and there's a big ramp that you have to meet. So you have a lot of generation that needs to come on very quickly to meet that ramp. In this particular example in California, we needed 13,000 megawatts in 3 hours. Just for scale, GRU's peak load is a little over 400 megawatts. So solar is absolutely going to be a significant part of GRU's generating future, but there are some things that need to be considered in regards to area control error, in regards to ACE. That includes GRU has to be able to balance supply and demand, and this includes balancing intermittency. High ramp rates are an area of concern, as well as inverters' abilities to provide VARs and harmonics. So VAR support essentially just providing the power that's necessary for motors to turn in your appliances. To minimize ACE impact, it's also good to have some geographic diversity where you site your solar facilities so that one large cloud system doesn't take out hundreds of megawatts of solar. Lastly, GRU participates in the Florida Reserve Sharing Group, which is a group of utilities that rely on each other to have some additional generation online in case one of our units trips. So if our units trip, then JEA, FPL, all the utilities, they all ramp up a little bit and cover us for a little while, and vice versa. If FPL trips a unit, we'll ramp up a little more along with other utilities. So we balance each other out and keep that ACE stable. However, for the sharing group, if you have a lack of fuel, then you are not permitted to call for reserves. So in this application, sunlight is viewed as the fuel source, so you're not able to call for reserves due to loss of solar, which is something that needs to be considered for GRU. But again, solar is definitely going to be a large part of what we're going to do in the future. And there are concerns with ACE, but we have some ways to mitigate that as well. Some of those ways to mitigate ACE are, the first one is the current lithium battery technology. It's very fast responding. The costs have been coming down, still relatively high as compared to traditional sources of generation. They have a somewhat limited duration, only about 2 to 4 hours on the utility scale applications. And depending on their application, they can have a relatively short life. You're talking about utility assets, and they can pose some safety risks that have to be mitigated. GRU has its eye on some upcoming battery technologies, flow batteries that have a longer duration, 8 to 10 hours, and they have reduced safety risks. Right now, there's not a lot of utility scale projects out there, and the cost is quite a bit higher than lithium projects. But we believe that down the road, it's going to be an important piece in GRU's utility arsenal. Another way to mitigate RICE is with fast responding generation. One of those options is RICE, which is an acronym for reciprocating internal combustion engines. These engines start very quickly and ramp very quickly to help enable more solar generation on one system. They are efficient across their operating ranges, and they are compatible with next generation fuels such as hydrogen and renewable natural gas. And GRU has one of these engines in a combined heat and power application that we operate for UF Health. It's part of the South Energy Center. Now, GRU, of course, has a resolution to achieve net zero emissions. To fill that oval with a net zero solution, it's going to require some different thinking. So the RP included net zero scenarios, which we'll cover next. So the IRP had 3 net zero scenarios. Each plan included adding solar, included adding battery storage, and adding biomass as well. In each scenario, the ACE impacts from solar were mitigated with either battery storage or with quick starting RICE or with buying power from the market, assuming that market was renewable power. In the first renewable scenario, scenario A, GRU is viewed as an island with no ties. So in that scenario, had to produce all of our power locally. We had RICE available, but it was not allowed to generate energy. It wasn't allowed to serve load. And we had a ratio of 5 megawatts installed for backup for every 20 megawatts of solar. We had a renewable scenario B, where we had a renewable market available, 50 megawatts at 50,000 megawatt hour. We had RICE also incorporated, but it was only used as for reliability. We had that same ratio, 5 megawatts for every 20 megawatts of solar. We had renewable scenario C. And in this scenario, there wasn't a market available, but we allowed the RICE units to deliver energy and capacity into the market. We had that same ratio of 5 megawatts for every 20 megawatts of solar. So these are the results of those renewable scenarios. In each scenario, GRU is sourcing over 700 megawatts of solar. There's also about 200 megawatts of batteries. There's an additional biomass plant. There's 120 megawatts of RICE. And in these scenarios, we have net present values that range from 2.4 billion to about 2.6 billion. And if you recall from the base case, which included fossil fuel generation, the base case, reference case, was about $2 billion. The 3 renewable scenarios that met the net zero resolution added between 430 and 600 million over the study period, which is over 20 years through 2039. Each scenario included the construction of an additional biomass unit, which contributes to system reliability and to fuel diversity. All scenarios included quick starting RICE to support and enable that solar generation. And all these scenarios resulted in significant excess or dump energy. So what is dump energy? Dump energy or excess energy occurs when generation exceeds your load. So when all of your generation units are turned down as long as they can go and excess generation is brought in, it has to be dumped to the market or it has to be curtailed. So just some things you can do to help mitigate dump energy. You can sell on the market if you have transmission available, or perhaps you can curtail it if your contract allows you to do that. The takeaways from the 2019 IRP are that measured increments of large installations of solar, 50 megawatts and above, over time allow battery storage prices to come down. It allows battery storage technology to improve. And as battery technology improves, it may offset the need for RICE, that you could use those long duration storage batteries instead of having RICE. Another takeaway is that large additions of solar are likely going to require some transmission and distribution upgrades. There's only so much land available in the area that can feed into GRU's transmission system. So some of that solar may be sourced from another county and imported over transmission. GRU's last IRP was in 2019, and we're getting ready to start our next IRP process. So the process is iterative. Yes, it has a long view and provides long-term direction, but that direction changes over time. Technology changes, prices change, needs change, regulations change. That's why it's an iterative process. That's why we're back here getting ready to start our next IRP. And the plan is to redo them every 4 to 5 years. In the short term, an IRP provides actionable items which you can use to evaluate and execute. The 2019 IRP recommended building 50 megawatts of solar, and it recommended replacing the Kelly Steam Turbine 8. So both of those items that the IRP recommended we actually did those. So that was a high-level look at the 2019 IRP. And of course, hindsight being 2020, we would obviously do some things a bit differently. So now I'll touch on what's going to be different from the 2019 IRP to the new IRP. The first thing we're going to do is there's going to be a lot more input from our customers and from our oversight boards. The last IRP was, for GRU, I think a lot more inward facing. It was viewed as a tool, and it wasn't designed to be outward facing. The next process will be much more outward facing. Next process is going to be critical for us to receive that buy-in from our customers. And in order to do that, we're going to have a lot of customer outreach. We're going to have customer workshops, city commission, utility advisory board workshops, online forums, lots of things. And we're likely going to work with a third party to glean this input. And the customer feedback that we receive and the feedback that we receive from our governing boards will have an impact on these scenario rankings. Next thing that will be different was that the base case will meet the 2045 resolution. It will include fossil fuel generation as the primary source of generation. It's going to have updates to technologies, including battery storage and the pricing of battery storage. It may include demand management and conservation measures, which were not considered in the previous IRP. The term is also going to be longer. Our last IRP was 20 years. We're going to look for at least 25 years on the next scenario. For the next IRP, we've reached out to other utilities in Florida that have recently conducted their integrated resource plans or are in the middle of doing them right now to learn about their community engagement process. We've issued an RFI for third-party engagement to learn a little more about what other utilities have done, what other companies have done for this, and those responses are due back next week. We are mapping out the IRP process and making sure that our boards have opportunities to give us input and to hear what's important to our community. We are creating the scope for this customer outreach and are looking to receive cost approximations for it. We are in the process of creating the invitation to negotiate, to solicit a third party, and hope to have this third party engagement company on board later this year. That's all I have for the presentation. Be happy to take any questions you have on the 2019 RFP.
Thank you. And I have a number of questions, but I'll hold off and let others go. First, with one quick question. When do you expect to be completed with this next IRP?
So, Mr. Chair, it depends, like a lot of things. So this is our first time doing community engagement associated with an IRP. We're hiring this third party because they have this expertise and to also have that arm's length away from GRU, so it's not viewed as GRU trying to bias the process. So we're going to work with this company to create the scope. What other utilities have found is this process takes about 6 months or so, and the technical analysis can take about 6 months as well. So it really depends on how much community engagement you do and how you do it, but we're looking at likely a year, at least a year from now. Just for reference, our last IRP took 18 months.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Yeah, Jason.
I have two questions. So the first one, going back to what you were talking about with the 10-year site plan and that big oval that seems to really be a central thing here. So that's 2032. This is 2022. So does that mean that big gap there in generation is already starting to kind of play into our 10-year site plans that we're submitting to the state?
That's correct. Yes. So, 10-year site plan has a 10-year forward look. It's a forward look. So, for the first time this year, looking out to 2032, 10 years out, we have a hole that we're going to need to fill with some kind of generation.
What are the ramifications of that as far as the state's concerned? Like the sort of red flags and alarm bells go off for them when they see that?
At the 10-year mark, not as much. At the 4-year mark, yes, certainly. They want to know that you're thinking about it, that you have a plan for it. But at 10 years out, then they're not particularly concerned about it.
Okay, thank you. And then on slide 38, when you talk about the future IRP and changes from the last one, you have the phrase may include demand management and conservation measures, and I'm just curious why the may is there.
Sure. So we're going to let the IRP's technical analysis and financial analysis stand for itself. So if there are conservation measures that are part of the best overall plan for the utility, then absolutely they're going to be in there. I just didn't want to say we're absolutely going to be in there when they may not be recommended. Of course, it's up to ultimately the City Commission and which direction we go with conservation programs, but just didn't want to force that into the plan when I wanted to let it speak for itself.
And I know we're not getting into talking about the next one, but I do want to note that that was categorically excluded from the last IRP as best I could see, and I hope that won't be the case moving forward on this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to clarify your question, Jason, so what I'm hearing you say is in the RFP evaluation, demand management will be considered.
Yes.
It just may not make the final list, is what I'm hearing, but it will be at least considered as a...
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Yes.
Okay. Don't mean put words in your mouth, just trying to understand. All right. Fletcher.
I just wanted to follow up with what Jason said. You had the slide at the very end about what some of the new features of the new IRP are going to be, and I just wanted to say hallelujah. We did a fairly comprehensive report earlier, and we were told that it would have input for the next IRP, and it had a lot of those features that you had up on the slide there. And I just want to say thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fletcher. Dean, I think you're up.
I know this probably been brought up before or something, but I just don't know information on wind-generated electricity. And I was thinking that maybe it could be a portion of the electricity generation versus the, solar. And I was just wondering, has any discussion been given to that? I know there, from my last place where I lived, they had wind speed problems and all that stuff, and I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Sure. So my aunt and uncle live on a farm in Illinois. They grow soybeans and corn and raise cattle. But as of recently, they've actually started making more money leasing their land to wind farms. And as you drive across where they live, you see wind farms everywhere. But you don't see that as much in Florida. So in where they live and in other parts of the country, the wind is much more predictable and much more consistent. In Florida, unfortunately, we don't have that advantage. So you don't see it nearly as much in Florida. There could be opportunities down the line for what they call wind by wire. So essentially, you're taking wind that is generated west of here, perhaps in the Texas market, that is brought over transmission. But as of right now, the transmission losses are just too great to make that much of a option for Florida.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. It was a great presentation, all the way down to the duck curve. Two questions. One, I'm curious about the 20-year horizon, since some of these generating assets should be able to go a lot further than that. And the second question would be is how close does your model come, what do you call it, to the NREL and EIE models for levelized cost of generation?
Sure. So the second question, for the different costs that we have loaded into the model, some of those we rely heavily on the Energy Authority, which did the last IRP for us. We rely pretty heavily on them to help us source those costs. Some of them they get from proprietary sources that they subscribe to. Others come from their members. But we try to look for a wide range of costs for each particular unit so that we're not locked into one particular cost that we may see. And I'm sorry, what was your first question?
So, that was the 20-year horizon, right?
Oh, yes, thank you.
The second one was how close did the model come perhaps to the levelized cost of energy as published by the EIA? And
Sure. Yeah, for the 20-year horizon, there's nothing magic about 20 years or 25 years. Of course, as you know, as you go out in time, your error bands go up and up and up. So there's nothing magic about 20 or 25 years. But last time around, we didn't get us through 2045. It stopped right at 2039. And that was prior to when the Deerhaven Renewable Unit is scheduled to retire. So this next time around, we want to go through at least 25 years so we can have that retirement on there, and we can show everyone that by 2045 everything is in there. For the EIA models, there's no one predetermined way to do the integrated resource plan. TEA uses a Plexus modeling software, which is pretty standard across the industry, and it's specialized for this type of portfolio analysis. But I know that we look heavily at we look at EIA for their natural gas forecasts. We look at them for what other plants are spending to build and maintain their plants. So it is a component that feeds in, but it's not particularly drilled into just EIA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, I guess I'll go ahead and hit my list. So my understanding is that this IRP was based on current technology, current pricing.
It was at the time. It was based on Right. So of course we started it in 2018 and didn't finish until 2019.
Okay.
And just looking at the natural gas markets, I mean, things change from yesterday to today, and
Sure.
it's certainly a lot different today than it will be tomorrow. And that'll be a real challenge, to be honest, going forward with the next IRP is how do you pick your gas forecasts? I mean, of course, you look at all the different forecasting methodologies and all the different forecasting sources, but they're all wrong. So, yeah, that's going to be a challenge.
So, and I guess where it's going with that question, so we heard numerous times that, okay, for the price of solar, the price of batteries, price of natural gas was based on the pricing at that time, rather than doing any kind of forecasting of how things were likely to change in the future. Is that a requirement of the IRP? Is that correct? And then is that a requirement of the IRP to take that approach?
Well, not. The way we approached it is there would be decreases in costs for some technologies. So for combined cycle units, probably not. It'll probably, fall along with CPIs, right? With inflation. For battery storage and for probably for solar as well, those costs will likely decline over time. So we did have degradation in pricing over time built into the model.
Oh, okay. Okay, that wasn't
for some options.
Okay. All right. So I have to say, on your duck curve, from what I could gather quickly, that curve was using an example of 60% of the capacity being covered by solar.
Right.
Which is a pet peeve of mine, being in the solar industry. The utilities will throw the very large, look at this horrible duck curve kind of thing. What kind of numbers do you guys come up with that the current technology of our generation could handle solar without disrupting?
Well, we did a nice study. So we're more concerned with the ACE ramifications right now than we are with actually getting to that point where we're having to do that. And that'll be the case for quite a while. So I think that's one of the questions that the IRP will help to answer, is what point do you get in trouble? I mean, the last IRP said 700 megawatts of coming online, and our system load is 400 megawatts. So
that would be a problem.
That's a pretty extreme example.
But I don't know if in the last IRP you came up with a 35%. What kind of percentage of our capacity could we currently handle with solar?
Well, the last IRP said that as long as you have the generation to back it up, I mean, we can bring in, and you have a place to put it, right? So when you're over generating, can you put into batteries?
Right.
And once those batteries are exhausted or fully charged and can't take any more, do you have a market where you can dump it? The challenge will be that a lot of other utilities are headed the same direction, right? So everyone's going to have a whole bunch of solar, and everyone's going to be trying to push out solar when they don't need it, and it'll be a challenge.
Yep. And I know this is for the future, but I'm hoping that we can use electric vehicles to help as a potential load.
Hope so too.
So on rice, just how's the efficiency of rice compared to combined natural gas, and how does the cost compare?
Sure. So again, it depends. So our Kelly combined cycle units, I don't want to say it too wrong, maybe 8,500 heat rate, 82? Okay, 82 to 8,500 heat rate. Rice is within that same range. But if you were to go look at FPL and their 1,000 megawatt, 1,500 megawatt units, those are down in the 6,000 range. So it depends on how old is your unit and how big is your unit.
So how about in cost? As we were talking about building new generation, how does rice compare to building new combined cycle natural gas?
So for combined cycle, it's pretty close. Combined cycles, you have 2 turbines instead of 1 turbine. So that, I would say rice is a little more costly than simple cycle and just a gas turbine, a little less expensive than combined cycle, its efficiency it's better than simple cycle, but perhaps not as good as combined cycle in some applications. So it's kind of a weighing of first cost versus operating costs.
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate that. Anyone else, any more questions come up? Fletcher, sorry.
What is a flow battery? That's a new one on me.
Yes, so flow batteries use an electrolyte. So there's different types of flow batteries. Vanadium is one, iron is one. So with these types of batteries, theoretically, you can have very large storage tanks, and you can have a lot of megawatt hours of storage, a lot of time of storage. So they're not limited to just the chemistry of the cells. They can be limited by just the size of your electrolyte tanks.
I think a lot of people just call them iron batteries. I think that's the common term as opposed to flow.
So a flow battery, I mean, it could be an iron battery, but basically rather than just having all your electrolyte there within the battery, you can take electrolyte out and keep adding new electrolyte and have just a very large separate tank to store capacity. So it could be an iron battery or whatever type of battery that has a liquid electrolyte. Always seemed very exciting, but we're still waiting for it to.
Right, yeah, there's some demonstration projects out there, but we just haven't seen it quite the scale yet to have utilities jump in feet first.
All right, anyone else? Questions, comments from the public? All right, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Now we are on to the UAB work plan.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, we have this matrix that we're using to kind of guide us as we go to future meetings. So I would love to share where we are now, like for the next 2 meetings. And then really this is a time for you all as a board, if you want to set different priorities, you want to work out some of the specific scope of items, it's for you all to do that work. But I'll just lay out what we have right now is June 28th, we have a workshop scheduled. At that workshop, the idea is that we would do 2 primary items, which are the AMI CIS update that I discussed earlier. And the second item is the distributed solar generation intake item that's kind of been around for a little while. This is the solar curtailment, that whole discussion. And so there'd both be, part of that would be part of a legal analysis, and the other part is part of the functionality in our system. And so those are the 2 main items. What I would say, what we could add to that is with the City Commission, we're providing an update on also DHR fuel that one of the members mentioned, and the Main Street Capacity and Renewal Upgrade Project, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. We could provide that as well. I think it will add a little bit of time, but I think we could get through all of those items in that time. The one that'll probably have the 2 that'll have the most discussion are the AMI project and the solar generation intake discussion. But that's what we currently have coming at that time. Then the only other one that we really have as a real date in the future established is the natural gas rebates. It's been a discussion that has happened a couple of times, but that kind of need to land that plane a little bit and take a recommendation to the City Commission. And so for the July meeting, that's the item that currently we have slated for that, and any other items that you may want to bring. We really look to your guidance, looking at your work plan and letting you all think through what the highest priorities are.
Okay, thank you for that. I know we'd asked for GRU to do an analysis on the cost or the value of shifting demand away from peak times to non-peak times. Is that how it relates to electric vehicles? Do we have any update on that, or when we might get some numbers?
So I don't know if that, I'm not sure that's on our work plan here.
That was one of those informational requests that we voted on a couple of meetings ago.
Okay, so I apologize. I did not have that on here. So, Say that again, so we'll make sure that we capture that.
Robin, can you take?
I'm trying. I don't.
I made the request, and we voted to do it, but it was basically, it was trying to understand what's the value to GRU if we can get people with electric vehicles to not charge at 5 at peak times, but to charge at some other time. Basically move people from a peak time of use to a not, just to understand is there potential for a win-win. So the question was, if we suddenly had a new demand at 5 p.m. versus a demand at 1 a.m.
Okay, so let me take that. I kind of want to talk to our folks of what the lift will be on that. How much time and effort that is, and if possible, if it's not a heavy lift, we can plan on bringing that back to that July meeting. If it's going to be a little more effort, we can talk about potentially pushing it.
And for that question, doesn't need a terribly high degree of accuracy. We don't need it down to the fraction of a cent. But just to give, like in FP&L territory, I think the number goes from 7 cents at off-peak to like 24 cents at peak or something. I mean, it's a huge difference, shocking range. So I was interested to see what GRU's take on that was.
That would take a change in the tariff and/or metering too, right?
Right, with AMI, there may be, I'm trying to find, is there a real win-win, especially as we see electric vehicles come on. I think there's some opportunity to make, as we were talking, potential sources for extra
demand side
power and demand side management, and some good things to come from there. So for the UAB, are there any things we want added to the list? Anything we want to reprioritize?
Got some lights, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Just so, Tony, when you do and this is a personal recommendation from this member, when you get ready for that electric vehicle, like Barry said, we just need an estimate. It doesn't have to be accurate, that's what he said. So for that, I don't think we should put that on the agenda for a UAB meeting. I think that should be a workshop item, and you can bring that back to those that are interested in electric vehicles, and they can share that broadly with everybody else. But for it to not be priority and not need any accurate dead-on information, I don't think it's something that we need to put on a meeting. What I would like to see is when we discuss the natural gas rebates, we really hone on those conservation rebates and unpack those. So if we don't have a clear understanding, if we don't have anything in place that can get some kind of pressure off of the customers or get some kind of rebates back to the customers. If we can look at all, because I heard a presentation where we're making a little bit of million here from the TEA and other places. So what is our projection for ever getting any rebates back to the customers if we ever get there? I know we have to get stable and we have to undo a whole few years, and that just, this is a side note, that 2019, as someone who sat through that process, that was a grueling presentation. Well done, no strike against you, but like you said, we went through that for a whole year. And so that to me should have been another workshop item for those who were not familiar and be a better use of staff time and those who have already been through that process. So I just want to make sure as we're doing this work plan that we also consider those things. Yes, we do need to catch our newer members up. We need that. But for our staff who have families and some of them are salaried, yes, it's included, but we have to be considerate that they have been probably at work since 8 this morning. And so we want to make sure that we're now, if it is that it is mandatory or something that we really need to address right now, then yes, we have to do that. But I want the UAB to consider, and for us to consider, we're all really, really interested in these subjects. And when we hear it from you guys' mouth, we have tons of questions, right? But we have to sometimes look at the work plan, like the plan was to introduce us to the 2019 plan, but there was some little speaks in there that I would have loved to unpack, but that's not quite what we were here for. And so I want to make sure that as we're doing, we keep everything organized and just be considerate. There are some meetings we have been in, budget meetings that last a really, really long time, and it is necessary for us to fill that out. But I want to make sure that it's not just us with our personal interest in trying to figure out, and that is actually on subject and on topic for why we're presenting. And I know I've been working all night, waiting all night to talk, so I'm going to take my time and talk no matter the looks I'm getting or heads turned. So y'all can just relax yourself, because we've been here since 6:30 and now it's my turn. So, the other thing I wanted to see, I know we talked about also, talking about the cost advocacy to the community, being a part of every discussion and how our underlying should be our ratepayers and whatever our transaction, our businesses are, what is going to be the impact on our customers if they're considered. I don't care if it is the TEA is doing all this wonderful work and this is how it benefits our customers, not just our company, but how does it benefit those other entities that are part of the company. I would like to see a little bit more in that so that they're considered in every process and it's not just a thing we say we're going to do. And so we don't need to make it a particular item, or we need to revisit that particular item, or we do need to make a particular item if we're not going to address it every time. And the only other thing I wanted to say for the whole meeting at night, and I see they're gone, is I've noticed for the years that I've been serving on this board that I've seen those two women sit in that space, not just in that space, in other areas that I work in the community, trying to figure this out, not just from the standpoint of the community, but the standpoint of how to keep the utility healthy and move along so that we're not cost burdens to our folk. And they go and they spend a lot of time away from their family to support communities that are not theirs. And so I just wanted to go on record saying that I appreciate Ms. Roberta Gassmeyer and Ms. Nancy Barron for all the work that they do behind the scenes that they don't see. They're not staff, they're not cost burden, they live in nice neighborhoods, they have accounts or whatever. It's not their issue. But I see them in my community every day, not just fighting, not just talking about the utility, but trying to find viable solutions. And so when we're talking about finding engagement firms and third party, I just suggest we look a little closer to home because there's some people that help. It's about relationship. And I know it's not, everybody want to be distant from, but when you do community engagement, it's about building a relationship. And I see a lot of times the city commission and others, we always want to bring in a firm. We always want to bring in a firm, and when the firm is gone, all you have is data, and we have the same broken relationship that we've had. We have to be a little bit more intentional and do some grassroots things. It's nice to look at other companies and what they do. Other companies are not Gainesville. And so we want to make sure that we're using the assets that we have in our community before we pay somebody outside of it, when we can be paying or doing participatory action research and paying the real experts in our community instead of hiring some firm to do what we should be doing ourselves.
So first I want to echo what you said about Roberta and about Nancy. It's nice. I mean, they'll hold us and GRU and everyone to task, but just to have some people who are positive, trying to contribute. But I wanted to, and I appreciate you bringing up the conservation rebates, because I know we talked about the natural gas, but I wanted to ask you, Carla, are you suggesting that we address both those issues at the same time?
I know he was saying that we could add another item. I was saying if we can have another item for that and we're discussing rebates, maybe we put them in those two categories and we discuss them as a whole. That's all I was suggesting.
Okay, no, I'm just asking clarification. Also, on the conservation rebates, because I appreciate you bringing it up, because I was thinking the same thing, because when the city commission came, it wasn't just, let's talk about natural gas rebates. It was, let's look at the rebate suite for ask the UAB to do that. So I feel that they don't ask us a lot of times for stuff, so I want to make sure we're doing that. Are we looking for the UAB to come up with conservation rebate ideas? Are we asking GRU staff to see if they have suggestions?
I think it's important that I think it should come from staff, and then for us to make suggestions as to how it can be modified or what, because they have to look into their portfolio and their thing to come up with something that's viable. I don't want a dream or a wish list. I want something that we may be able to move on and something that makes sense for the commission.
So what you're asking probably in the not this next meeting, with the one after, for GRU to probably hit that one as one of our next priorities.
So we can at least start there.
Okay.
And then if it's something that we want to take to a workshop and start talking, so we can come up with a list for them to say, hey, we heard your presentation, now this is what we have to say back. If it's that type of thing, then we can schedule a workshop for it.
Okay, great. Okay, just want to understand. Thank you. All right, Fletcher.
Barry, I'd like to see if I could get on the agenda for a workshop, maybe July, for 20 minutes, just to talk about what our analysis of the last IRP was, and we came up with recommendations for the future one, so I think it would be the right time to review what our recommendations were at that time, just for 20 minutes or so.
Well, let me ask, so GRU is gonna come back and talk about the next IRP and what your plans are. When are you planning to do that?
I'm looking at our staff. We're about to launch with the public engagement part of it in the coming months. Yeah, Eric, do you mind addressing that from a schedule standpoint?
So, Chair, members, Eric Walters, GRU staff. So we are just kicking off this process to look for a third party. We are finalizing a plan and a timeline as far as steps go to make sure that we incorporate and provide a space for all of those. So it's probably going to be a couple months before we actually get down to this plan and bring you something of substance. We can bring you the plan, almost at any time, but it'll be just that, right? We're just getting started with this process. So in the next couple months, I believe we'll have some viable steps that we're going to take, a good plan to work out, and a reasonable timeline, and then we can start talking about that then.
So just to Fletcher's question, and maybe that's what you just answered, is when would you be coming to us to say, well, what do you guys want to see in this next IRP that we didn't see in the last one?
Sure. So that's a great question. So, Chair and members, what we envision this as is once we get this firm on board, is they would start to engage the boards to get that feedback, right? So it'll be a combination of GRU and this firm to be able to pull all that together. Because if you think about the demographics of Gainesville, they are diverse, and we want to make sure that all those constituents are represented, right? And that's most of where that expertise comes from, is how do we devise a plan to make sure that we capture all of that feedback. And so that's going to take some time. That's going to be a process. But we want to make sure that the boards are included in that feedback process as well. So as I said, we're finalizing the plan. We've got a pretty good outline, and there are blocks in there for UAB feedback, for city commission feedback, for citizen feedback, right? So those are all built in.
Okay. All right, thank you. Fletcher, does that match with what you're thinking?
Well, I'm just really pleased that we're going to have an opportunity. I think the last time around, I think a lot of us felt we didn't have a real intense involvement. And I think this is just the 180-degree opposite. I'm real pleased.
Good. Okay, thank you. Jason.
So, two quick questions, and two quick comments. One, I really appreciate that we're being about this work plan, and I want to make sure we're stewarding it well, which it seems like we are. And so the very first item on the work plan is about this schedule for the joint meeting with the city commission about our role, if any, on general manager candidate stuff. And I thought I heard rumors that there had maybe already been some discussion or changes happening with that. So this might be something that doesn't need to be on the main agenda, but.
So, Mr. Chair, I can give you all a little bit of update of discussions that the City Commission has had. I'll do that in a second. What I would say, like an item like this, I don't think there's anything we need to do at one of your all's meetings. This, probably the easiest way to handle this in your all's role is for the chair to contact the mayor and say, this is what we as a board were inquiring about, and then kind of go from there. So that's what I would recommend. But just as an update, the City Commission has, back in February, they considered, hey, what do we want to do with interim general manager, city attorney, and equity and inclusion charter officers. And what they had said back in February was, well, let's start a process in the fall as we're bringing on new city commissioners, because three to four city commissioners are going to turn over in the fall and start in January. And so they said, let's start a process so that they can be engaged along with existing commissioners at the same time. Over the last month, there was discussion about maybe pulling back from that and just appointing us, all of the charter interim charter officers into the roles permanently. but then they decided not to, and they kind of went back to the old plan. The only thing they accelerated was the equity and inclusion charter officer. He's been in the role as interim the longest, and so they talked about in July they're going to talk about moving forward with that role, but waiting until the fall for the rest of them, including the general manager. So that's where that stands right now. And again, I think in terms of your all's involvement, probably having the chair talk to the mayor is the best path forward. And I'll share one more thing. I know on the last city manager, or some of the city manager processes, there's some kind of public meetings, public times when you can interact with the candidates and talk with them, and there's little hors d'oeuvres and you get a little chat around. It's not a formal role in the process, but you do have an opportunity to meet and talk and things like that. So there are opportunities to do that. If you want a more formal involvement, I think that's going to need to talk with the mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Did you want to?
Well, on that subject, I'm not sure that we were 100% unanimous. So before I go to the mayor, I wanted to just do a quick straw poll. Is that something, do we want to request to have involvement in talking with the candidates?
Not I. I think it's a dangerous precedent to set. I think we should let them hire if we want to make a because we can all make recommendations. Sure. Mine is going to be different because if they're not community focused and they're not this and they're not that, then mine is going to make a difference. If we're going to ask for our input, we have to have unanimous input, and that's going to be very difficult to get from. Well, we're not that diverse, but I'm sorry, we're just not. And so it's just going to be hard to kind of capture that. I don't. If it's not going to be a unanimous, we all decide, then I don't think we should have an involvement, and it's not going to be unanimous because I don't want no part of it.
Okay. Fair enough. And my personal opinion.
That's just my thought.
Yeah. I don't think that it needs to be unanimous. I mean, I guess my opinion it would be to do it. This is the one person that is is a GRU employee, head of GRU,
Right.
And so we're just making recommendations. So I mean, I would want your opinion to say that when they're looking at candidates, to have your voice to say, using not that you have a total ownership diversity, but that we're all looking at the different parts of it. So
well, I know, and I said this in the first time I made a protest. I know if you can pass this by the mayor and commission that they want our input, then we'll give our input, and mine to be unanimous because they're not going to want our input. So you go ahead, and then as long as y'all agree with me on my candidate, then we're fine. But if you can pass it by the commission to say we're going to allow 8 citizens to decide who we hire for this time, because what's going to happen is this group is going to say, well, we want to input on the city manager, and this group is going to say, well, we should choose the chief of police because we're affected by this, and then this group is going to say, well, we should choose the inclusion office because we all black, and so we definitely need somebody who can. It's just a dangerous precedent, and it's overreaching. It's not what we're here for.
And just to be clear, so we obviously wouldn't choose. We're an advisory board.
You understand what I said? I know you understand what I said. Okay, so you can discuss it as much as you want to.
Okay.
I'm against it, and you understand what I said, and I understand your stance. So there's no sense to hold up staff and keep going over that.
Okay.
I disagree. If you pass it by the mayor, then we open up for discussion. We give them our recommendation. Like General Manager said, our first step should be our chair reaching out to our mayor to see what it is. Should we be able to do this? And then he's going to refer to the state and the lawyers and all that to see what is our viability. Do they want our opinion?
Right.
So
and I'm just make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you? I'm not trying to be difficult, honestly. I may be a little slow.
I'll help you understand what I'm saying. Go ahead, Barry.
No. So are you suggesting that I don't talk to the mayor?
No.
Okay.
I said it 4 different times. Let me say it again so you can understand.
Okay.
You, our chair, needs to reach out to our mayor.
Okay.
And he's going to talk with his constituents.
Okay.
And if you can pull it, so I can make myself my microphone on. If you can get them to approve wanting our input, then we're going to give our input.
Okay.
I still feel like that input should be unanimous, so I want to make sure you all agree with my candidate.
All right. Okay. Thanks. I'm not trying to be difficult. Honestly, I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
And I'm trying to make sure you understand.
Thank you. Sometimes you have to repeat it a few times.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Carmen.
All right. I meant that to be a short question, sorry. My other short question, one of our agenda items is about the environmental justice considerations in terms of siting. And we had talked at a meeting or two ago about reaching out to the group that was going to do a presentation for us. And I'm just wondering if that has happened at all?
I'll turn to Robin on that.
No, did you all vote and decide that?
I believe so.
Sorry, guys.
It was pretty strongly said.
Yeah. Voted on.
So,
It wasn't voted on?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that because we talked about putting it on the work
Yeah,
plan
yeah, but-
first, and then I checked in on it again to specifically say, can we get the ball rolling with reaching out to these folks? And I thought again,
It was well established,
Okay.
but I don't think we voted on it.
okay, well,
Is it in our minutes? I guess.
I apologize. I can go back through the minutes and look, and then I will follow up with you all accordingly.
Thank you,
I'll do
Ms.
that
Robin.
tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
those are my two quick questions and just two quick comments. I want to second what Carla was saying about community engagement. I appreciate that you all are going to go this route of talking to this firm and things like that, but in this community, some of the best public forums that I've seen put on topics of energy, food, those sorts of things have been put on by the NAACP Environmental Justice Committee. They put on some really fantastic, well-attended forums in this community. So if there is any way that as part of this process, we can provide some resources to them, partner with them in some way, I think that it would make it so much richer of a process than if we have an outside firm come in that we're throwing a lot of money at and they don't know anybody in this community. So I want to second that. And then also just on the conservation discussion, the conservation rebates discussion, which to me is very much separate from the natural gas conversation. I understand like the way this is being phrased is around coming up with rebates. And I just want to say, I think it's a much bigger picture conversation that we need to be having at the outset. We need to be talking about what is the framework for GRU's conservation programs? What are our overarching goals? What are our metrics for success? Those sorts of things. So before we get into the minutia of this rebate or that rebate, I hope that we sort of will step back and have a bigger picture conversation that will encompass that, because that will get us to the rebates that are actually useful and productive in this community. So thank you.
Well, let me ask you on that question. Are you suggesting that GRU define the constraints or that the UAB define the constraints?
Well, I just think we need to have a conversation about the constraints, and we should definitely be part of that conversation.
Okay.
Rather than launching directly into like individual rebates.
Right.
And just, as an example, again, I reference the ACEEE a lot, American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, and they publish an annual report that rates communities all over the country on their energy efficiency goals. And they have a lot of metrics that they use. They have a really well-established process. So even just starting with like that sort of a level conversation so that we can really define who are we trying to affect with these rebates? What are the outcomes that we want? That sort of thing to me would be a really productive way to go into that conversation.
And I appreciate that thought and agree with it wholeheartedly. That's a great suggestion. I just want to, again, for clarity, to say, what are we asking GRU? You guys come off, but what I'm hearing you say is no. Maybe in our next workshop we can have a discussion on what we're trying to achieve with the rebates. Is that?
Yeah, and I'm not even saying like staff, we need you to present. Like for instance, I would be more than happy to give a brief presentation on the ACEEE, annual report or whatever. I mean, I want to do my part on this too. I'm not trying to put all this on staff, but I think we need to have that bigger picture conversation.
Okay, thank you. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna kind of piggyback on Carla's comments and respond to the direction the board's been taking for a long time. And the general manager asked what our priorities are. I got to tell you, my priority is getting through these meetings as efficiently as possible and making recommendations to the city commission. That's what I thought I was signing up for. Staff comes and tells us what they are planning on doing, and then I tell the city commission, hey, I think that's a good idea, or no, maybe we should try a different direction, maybe toss out a few opinions in the process. I am absolutely not here to micromanage the daily workings of GRU and tell GRU staff how to do their job. I'm just not. And I'm definitely, it was clear when we had the meetings about the IRP, a lot of people weren't happy with it. They didn't like Rice. I'm not interested in having those there's no value in having those conversations again when there's a new IRP on the way, and we can have them then. So those are just kind of my thoughts. Like I think we've already disrupted things a lot, and I don't want to disrupt them anymore. I want to help GRU do their business and meet the goals that the community has established by making recommendations. If I wanted to work at GRU, I would have applied at GRU. So those are just my thoughts. But I can't be here till 9, 10 o'clock a couple times a month telling seasoned professionals how to do their job. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That's excellent, mine. So I just wanted to end by, I guess, two things. One is, again, we're looking for what you all are looking for here and what those priorities are, and as a board, for you all to vote on that unanimously, or you vote on that so that we can kind of establish that going forward. So that's one. Second one is I want to address the public outreach portion of the IRP. Having a third party come in and help us doesn't mean staff isn't going to be engaged with the community, doesn't mean we're not going to engage in some of the groups mentioned by members. We are absolutely going to do that. I think what the third party allows us to do is have a framework so that we're efficiently collecting the information from the community. We're processing that in a proper way so that we don't just put on a bunch of workshops and then GRU goes off and does something and doesn't follow anything in the workshops. It's a way for us to gather information, process that information, and help with some of that engagement. But our staff will be very involved in that, and the idea is to continue to engage in those relationships with the community as we do that. We will have our government affairs and community relations person intimately involved in this process. Our communications area intimately involved in this process, as well as the idea of the third party. So I just wanted to bring in that third party isn't some cold, distant person that doesn't know anything about our culture, but they will engage with our staff as well as we go through the process. So,
I just wanted to make just one comment. When you said that and you named all those wonderful people that are going to be at the table, and you're going to do an RFP for this third party, what you going to pay the community for coming to give their input? They're experts too. And see, that's my point when I say you don't need a third party, you need to build these relationships within your community. We extract wealth out of our community, and what happens with this, and I'm really grateful in my new role to be over a very large grant where they're not doing that. They're recognizing who our consultants really are, because what we've been doing historically in the city of Gainesville is we hire a third party. We give them $50,000, $100,000. They call our community. They get the information from the community. Type y'all up a nice little report, give y'all some recommendations. They go home with $100,000. They got a gas card for participating in some cold sandwiches. And so when we're having these round tables and we want the engagement, and then they come back and say, oh, they don't want to be engaged. Well, everybody getting paid except for us. So if you guys were not getting a check, would y'all be here trying to help us figure it out? No. So if y'all going to engage the community and want to do some robust community engagement, look at some participatory action research models so that everybody has skin in the game and everybody has a benefit for that planning process. That's all I'm asking, is that you don't take the money and just give it top heavy here, and they want to give us a free meal and a $10 gift card for coming to get all of our information and for us doing the work. Because if you see these workshops that environmental justice puts on and my group puts on and other groups put on, there is a lot of planning, a lot of work, a lot of stuff that goes into that. And it takes a lot for people to come out that are working and already cost burdened with utilities trying to figure it out. Not that they don't care, but if you give them an incentive to come, just like they're any other expert at the table, because they are. That was my point when I was talking about third party. I don't care who you get to come in, as long as everybody at the table getting paid and not just y'all.
John, I think you had your light on.
Tonight we heard a presentation on a plan. I was more interested, the process that was used to arrive at the plan. I was impressed with the plan itself, but I keep looking at, I'm not interested in telling the staff how to do their job. I am interested in understanding the processes they use to arrive at their plans, and their decisions, because that's more important than a particular plan.
Okay. So for the new members, are the new members going through the orientation that we went through? I know with
They will be.
okay.
Yes,
I think
I know
that's
I keep saying that, but
I think that's a critical piece.
yes.
That is a very critical piece, and I think that's the frustration of some of us, because they're getting that orientation on the board while we were in meetings. And so at some point, and to his point, you should know exactly what their process is. We had an opportunity to go through a board orientation and visit every department and sit down with all the leaders, and you guys didn't have that. So we understand, but that needs to happen, and I think this can make these meetings go a little bit better.
And that is being scheduled and happening, and I think even some of the members that, because of COVID, didn't get to go through that, we're also going to try to do that as well.
Great.
Come back and hit those, because I will say that those, I think that is the most efficient use of time, because you really get a full inside look at how the utility operates and who the staff is and things like that. So.
Okay.
I know some people who can't spell GRU.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add, if this board was given clear, unmistakable direction from the city commission that they wanted us directing GRU, I would back down. But I don't know that I've heard that. They told us that, yeah, look into the rebates, but these boards are typically set up as advisory boards to give the city commission another piece of information to chew on in their decision-making process. So that's all I'm trying to say. I don't want this board to get too big for its britches. I feel like that's been happening for a while. I've tried to ride along, but that's just so you know. If you're going to talk to the mayor about telling GRU who to hire for their general manager, ask him at the same time to give us a clear message that they like the way we're handling this board, and I'll be fine with it.
All right. Well, let me go. Just I hear your frustration. I guess I'm uncertain. Like in this case of talking to the mayor, my understanding was I was being asked to say, "Do you want our input?" Because I agree. Right. We're not here to run GRU. They're the experts. I guess I'm trying to understand. I hear your frustration. I'm not sure I understand it though.
I just feel that this board over time has gravitated from an advisory board to an instructing board. I think people have lost their jobs over it because the commission may feel caught in the middle when ultimately they're the decision makers. They're the stockholders, whatever you want to call them. But they also have a political responsibility to the citizens of this community. And I'm, that's not to say that and I've said this before. I'm totally 100% on board with the goals that we've set, and I definitely think the community should be involved. I just think we've gotten kind of pushy. Maybe it's just me. I just know the work that I do. I don't enjoy when people tell me how to do my job. I'm cool with having conversations. That's what we're here for, is to have conversations and spitball ideas. And that's really what it boils down to. I feel like we've been maybe being a little too bossy.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else before we move off of this topic? UAB work plan. All right, member comment? Hearing none. Citizen comment? Hearing none.
It's all staff out there.
Next, they're still citizens.
That's true.
Next meeting date, June 28th. Meeting adjourned.